Good evening. Welcome to South Asia Newsline. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Here are the top stories we're tracking for you on Tuesday, the 18th of July. India grants medical visa to man residing in Pakistan administered Kashmir. UN report on Afghanistan shows grim state. And cigarette makers choke after Indian government hikes cess after GST. And now for all the details. Pakistan Army on Tuesday resorted to heavy firing and shelling at separate locations along the line of control in Indian Kashmir. Meanwhile, security forces gunned down 3 militants in Anantnag district of the province.
Pakistani troops on Tuesday continued to violate the ceasefire along the de facto border in Rajouri and Poonch districts of Indian Kashmir. The Indian Army has been strongly retaliating to the unprovoked firing from across the border. On Monday, a 9-year-old girl and a soldier were killed and 4 others injured as Pakistani troops fired mortars at separate places along the de facto border called the Line of Control or the LOC. Meanwhile, 3 militants were killed by security forces in an encounter in Anantnag district of Indian Kashmir.
जिसमें कि रात को 3 लश्कर-ए-तोयबा के dreaded terrorists थे, वो eliminate किए गए.
The troops of arch rivals India and Pakistan intermittently exchanged fire on the line of control despite an agreement in 2003 that a ceasefire should be observed along the working boundary. India has long accused Pakistan of training and arming militants and infiltrating them across the LOC. Pakistan denies those allegations.
Meanwhile, vice presidential candidate of India's ruling BJP and its allies filed his nomination papers on Tuesday. He will face the opposition nominee in an August 5 parliamentary vote.
India's ruling Bharatiya Janata Party's vice presidential candidate M. Venkaiah Naidu filed his nomination on Tuesday. Naidu resigned as a cabinet minister from the federal government soon after his candidature for the vice president's post was announced on Monday evening. He was accompanied by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and other senior leaders as he filed his nomination for the constitutional post.
I am fully aware of the august responsibilities associated with the office of the Vice President. So I would like to assure one and all, I will uphold the dignity, the decorum of the institution and also work towards further strengthening parliamentary democratic system.
Meanwhile, India's opposition parties fielded Gopal Krishna Gandhi, grandson of independence hero Mahatma Gandhi, as their nominee for the vice president's post. The former governor filed his nomination in the presence of Congress Party President Sonia Gandhi, former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and other senior opposition leaders.
I am here with all humility to place before the electors, the honourable members of Parliament, Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha together, the aspirations of the common citizen of India.
Incumbent Vice President Hamid Ansari's term ends on August 10th.
Indian Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj on Monday said that the Indian government will grant a medical emergency visa to an ailing man living in Rawalakot in Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Taking to Twitter about the move, Swaraj said that POK is an integral part of India. Pakistan has illegally occupied it. 24-year-old Osama Ali, living in Rawalakot region of Pakistan-administered Kashmir, has been diagnosed with a tumor and wants to come to Delhi for his treatment. His visit was stuck in a bureaucratic process. Pakistan Prime Minister's advisor on Foreign Affairs, Sartaj Aziz, did not write a letter of request to the Indian High Commission in Islamabad for granting a medical emergency visa. The three-member special bench of Pakistan's Supreme Court hearing the Panama Papers case on Tuesday observed that it would examine the entire material first. It will then decide on disqualifying Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif or sending the matter to an accountability court.
The special bench of Pakistan's Supreme Court resumed hearing the Panama Papers case on Tuesday after the petitioner presented their arguments in favour of the Joint Investigation Team or JIT's final report a day earlier. Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's counsel Khwaja Haris read out the original 13 questions posed by the Supreme Court to the JIT. He accepted that Sharif was issued a residence permit by the UAE government for being the chairman of the board of Capital FZE, an offshore firm exposed by the JIT. The court adjourned the hearing until Wednesday, when Sharif's legal team will continue to present its argument.
Meanwhile, members of a Sindhi organization organized a rally in Pakistan's southeastern Sindh province to demand the release of its political activist illegally detained by the Pakistani army. They raised slogans against the injustices inflicted on them by the Pakistani establishment.
Hundreds of activists of Jai Sindh Mutahida Mahas or JSMM marched in Pakistan's Hyderabad city on Monday to demand independence for southeastern Sindh province. Members of the banned Sindhi organization in Pakistan also demanded the release of Sindhi political activists abducted allegedly by the Pakistan Army and its Inter-Services Intelligence or the ISI. A number of women, children and youth attended the march. They chanted slogans against the Pakistani establishment and urged the international community and human rights organizations to take immediate notice of atrocities being meted on their community. The Sindhi independence movement is fighting its case on diplomatic and international platforms to bring justice to their people and gain freedom from Pakistani rule.
Moving on to news from Afghanistan, the United Nations painted a grim picture of Afghanistan. In its mid-year report on Afghanistan, it said that the number of civilians killed and injured in the Afghanistan conflict during the first 6 months of 2017 persisted at the same record high levels as last year.
The United Nations in a statement on Monday said that extreme civilian harm continued amid a worsening toll of suicide attacks and a greater impact on women and children in Afghanistan. According to figures from the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan or UNAMA, a total of 1,662 civilian deaths were confirmed between January 1 and June 30th, an increase of 2% on the same period last year. The report highlighted that 40% of all civilian casualties during the 6-month period were killed or injured by anti-government forces using improvised explosive devices. The reports also made a series of recommendations, including calling on anti-government forces to stop targeting civilians and to enforce directives from the Taliban leadership calling for an end to such attacks. The report also recommended ongoing support from international military forces to support and train the Afghan National Army.
More news from Afghanistan. For the Afghan girls team competing at the International Robotics Competition in Washington, they have already won. Despite being initially denied an entry into the United States, the group of girls is representing Afghanistan alongside teams from across the world.
A team of Afghan girls competed in an academic robotics competition in the United States on Monday. They were able to make it to the competition after American officials, with the intervention of President Donald Trump, agreed to allow them to enter the country despite initially denying them visas. Members of the team said they see the competition as a chance to help improve conditions in Afghanistan, where women and girls often face significant limitations in public and private life.
We are so happy we attended to this competition. I can say our feeling to you now. With words we can say, describe our feeling.
فامیل‌ها ما تشویق‌های زیادی کردن به همین خاطر احساس خیلی خوبی دارن نسبت ذهنیت راجع به ما عوض شده این میفهمن که واقعا ما استعداد این داره که در بخش تکنولوژی بتونیم پیشرفت کنیم و بتونیم در آینده انجینیر کشور خوب باشیم.
Waving the Afghan national flag, the all-girl team was given a resounding welcome as they made their appearance at the inauguration ceremony of the competition. They stood aside teams from more than 100 countries at the first global international robotics competition.
In other news from India, Indian shares on Tuesday fell from record highs hit in the previous session. This comes as the country's biggest cigarette maker and index heavyweight ITC Limited plunged after the federal government increased tax on cigarettes.
India's benchmark Bombay Stock Exchange Index Sensex backtracked from record high levels with a 12% plunge in ITC shares, dragging the index lower in early trade on Tuesday. The markets ended the season on a weaker note as the broader National Stock Exchange Index Nifty 2 retreated from its all-time peak and dipped below the 9,900 level. Stock markets experts attributed the drop to the fall in Asian shares and the upward revision of the cess rates under Goods and Services Tax or GST on cigarettes by the federal government.
Post GST, the cigarettes, the taxation on cigarette were reduced between 7 to 12%. That anomaly has been corrected, and that is the reason that today we've seen huge selling in shares of ITC company, which is a heavy weightage, which has heavy weightage on index, and that's the reason that Nifty and Sensex are down today.
India raised the total tax on cigarettes, resulting in an increase of as much as $12 for every 1,000 cigarettes, with effect from Tuesday, adding about $777 million in revenues for the government. After GST was rolled out, cigarettes initially became cheaper because the total tax burden had come down by about 6 to 7%. The tax was increased after uproar from anti-tobacco and several health groups.
Well, that's the way it was in South Asia this evening. Before we conclude, the top stories once again. India grants medical visa to man residing in Pakistan administered Kashmir. UN report on Afghanistan shows grim state. And cigarette makers choke after Indian government hikes cess after GST. Now our viewers can watch the show on SouthAsiaNewsline.com. You can also visit us on Facebook.com/SAsiaNewsline and follow us on Twitter @SAsiaNewsline. Well, that's all in tonight's edition. We'll see you same time tomorrow. Good night.